We all got secrets.
For all of my straight and bi men listening and my gay and bi women listening, everybody who has sex with women and wants to do better, I've got a product for you. Have you heard of Kenneth Play? He is an Adonis of a man, and he has put together a video course teaching others how to please women the way only he knows how. I have personally had the pleasure of spending an intimate evening with Kenneth. I don't think I've ever had a first-time sexual encounter with somebody that was just 100% pleasurable. There was never a moment of pain. There was never a moment of meh. He knew my body better than I knew my body. He found pleasure spots in me that I did not know I had, and he made me come many times. I have gifted his web course, Beyond Satisfied Pro, to lovers of mine, and in every case, they have become better lovers as a result. And now I would like to gift this to you with a 15% discount. Go to kennethplay.com/closeted. That link gets you 15% off Kenneth's Beyond Satisfied Pro course. This is just for my listeners. Trust me, no one regrets being great in bed, and this course will get you there. kennethplay.com/closeted.
We all got secrets.
Oh, thank God. I have such an important question for you.
Okay.
Are you busy?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So, Holly, you're a mom, and you're a devout practicing Catholic.
No.
You were once a devout practicing Catholic.
Correct.
All right. So, this is a really big moral conundrum that I feel our society is having right now. So, is it okay? Coming at this from God's perspective as you are, would you say that God approves of polyamory as long as everybody is kept in the loop about it? Or do you think God hates all sex outside of marriage?
What?
That's the question. Answer the question, Holly. You're the expert on God. You're the most religious person I know. And you're wholesome, so help me out.
I mean, God gave people free will, so he doesn't give a fuck what you do.
You heard it here, everyone. Holly says God doesn't give a fuck what you do.
I mean,
Amazing.
as long as you're kind to people, then what does it matter what you do in your private life?
Thank you, Holly. Thanks. You really helped me with that. Thanks.
You're
Have a great
welcome.
day.
I love you. Bye.
I love you too. Bye.
We all got secrets. We all got secrets. We all got praise glass and air your soul. Oven kept in high and served bleaching Molotov. Oven kept we all got secrets.
From Kurtco Media, I'm Samia Mounts, and this is Closet Ed. Every week on this show, I'll be telling the story of an anonymous guest who looks totally normal on the outside, but beneath the surface is living life very differently from what we're told is normal. Last week, we heard from Liz, a woman who literally has it all. Loving husband, beautiful kids, killer career, and who has thrived partially because of her and her husband's agreement to not be monogamous. This week, I have a similar story for you, but from a guest who is Liz's polar opposite. She's a woman, he's a man. She's not religious, he's a regular churchgoer. She's politically liberal, he's a registered Republican who is active in conservative politics. He's the last person you'd ever suspect of keeping secrets of this nature. But before we get into it, bit of housekeeping. As I've said, all the guests on this show are anonymous. All names have been changed. Some voices have been altered, but I'll never tell you which ones. And each guest has the opportunity to review their episode before it's released to make sure we didn't accidentally include any identifying details. All of my guests are active members of their communities, and if you knew them in real life, you would never suspect there was anything subversive about them. And yet, all of them are quietly rebelling against the confines of social norms and expectations in kind of revolutionary ways. I'm making this show so that the rest of you quiet rebels out there have some evidence that you're not alone. And for those of you who haven't started rebelling, I hope these stories help you pursue your deepest happiness and fulfillment in life.
We all got secrets. We all got secrets. We all got secrets.
Okay, this week's guest, Jason. He's a devout Christian who can recite Bible verses from memory. He's a dedicated member of the Republican Party who works as a lawyer in the field of constitutional law. And he's a happily married father who prioritizes time with his kids. Here he is.
Very much a professional, very much a family man, husband of more than, going on 17 years here. And somebody who is traditional, religious, someone who tries to be in church on Sundays, and somebody for whom, community and custom really means a lot, right? I'm somebody who believes in all of these things and has sort of a white picket fence. Actually, we literally have a white picket fence. I'm pretty boring, I think, to a lot of people just looking from the outside. I think I'm a fairly wholesome individual.
But like every guest on this show, there's more to Jason than meets the eye.
I probably smoke a little more marijuana and do a few more psychedelics than anybody at the office or at church probably has reason to suspect. But the other thing that I think you might be most interested in is the fact that I and indeed we, my wife and I, are polyamorous. I guess you could say we have an open marriage, but I sort of prefer the term polyamory. And she has a boyfriend who she has been with for the better part of the last couple of years. And I have a girlfriend who I am deeply in love with. We're both very much in love with our partners. And I've been with my girlfriend. I've known her for about 1.5 years, but been with her for about half that time. And we have sort of this, I guess, cozy little polycule.
What the heck is a polycule, you ask? Okay, the term combines the words polyamorous, meaning many loves, and molecule. And it means the larger network of relationships that you become a part of when you date or see people non-monogamously. So, if my husband has a girlfriend and she's married to someone who is seeing 2 other people, all 6 of us, me, my husband, his girlfriend, her husband, and the 2 people he's seeing, we're all part of the same polycule. Hey, hope that made sense. So for Jason and his wife Tamara, the journey to their cozy little polycule dynamic was not an easy one.
It is a very emotional story. She and I have known each other for the better part of 20 years. We met in college. We were I think 19 and had a very quick, passionate sort of connection. But we got married. We got married, pretty young.
For a lot of people, once the rings are on the fingers, that's it. You've achieved top relationship status and can move on to other things. Partner box, check.
Yeah, exactly. Partner box, check, and done. And we went through sort of the struggles of young couple, turning into young parents. And my career just took off at a certain point. And she really was the backbone of my success. Now, Tamara is somebody who's extremely gifted and has so many skills and passions herself, educated and so forth. But at a certain point in our relationship, I think she sort of had to shrink herself to support kind of the weight of my dreams and ambitions, sort of taking care of the family at home. And I got so sort of sucked into just kind of my career, I think, that at a certain point, I think I lost sight of her.
And then, about a decade into their marriage, a big old wrench got thrown into the works. A very common wrench. If you've been married for a long time, you might relate.
I started meeting many different people and wound up meeting somebody in a work capacity who, long story short, I kind of fell head over heels for.
Da-da-dum. And boy, oh boy, did this new person light Jason's romantic soul on fire. We'll call her Michaela.
I remember the first time I walked into the boardroom, when I saw her, it was like static electricity in my mind. She had this sort of poise and demeanor. She sort of struck you as like, not to be funny about it, but sort of like the fantasy librarian that so many guys have in their minds, who kind of like, takes the glasses off and pulls her hair down, and then suddenly it's just like, like this
Right.
brilliant vixen and everything.
Jason found himself in a serious moral and emotional conundrum. He loved his wife, but their relationship had become something neither of them was putting much effort into. And this new person was exciting him in ways he'd never experienced before. He felt more alive than he had in years. Now, as a devout Christian with integrity, he was never going to cheat on his wife. But something needed to change.
Tamara and I had grown so far apart that I just didn't know what to do, and I thought that the thing to do would be to be honest. I guess it was around this time that I started to think in terms of the possibility of polyamory.
He spent a year thinking about that possibility before finally bringing it up to Tamara.
We were lingering at the table, and I said to her, I wanted to talk to you about something, and I said, it kind of has to do with Michaela, who I know through the firm, and she's a friend who, I think really highly of, but there's a little bit more to it than that, at which point Tamara's eyes start to narrow a bit. And there's no, I said, affair or anything like that. I was like, but I love her, And I also was quick to say, but that doesn't mean I'm not in love with you too. I said, both of these things are true. And she said, okay, you're telling me this because, and I said, because I want to be honest. And she said to me, but it's also because you want to give more of yourself to her. And I said, yeah, that's true.
So, this is wild to me. I think it's safe to say that a lot of people in long-term relationships struggle with the things Jason was struggling with. And I also think it's safe to say that most of them either suffer in silence or end up having affairs. I've had many conversations with people who felt that merely bringing up the idea of an open relationship with their partner would be a catastrophic relationship-ending event. And often they're right. Luckily, that wasn't Tamara.
She received that with such poise and kind of self-control that I think I didn't initially realize how hard it was for her to hear that. I thought it would be hard for her to hear it, but she took it in such a self-controlled sort of way that I actually emerged from that conversation thinking, well, I guess that wasn't that bad, And she said to me, well, you can't help how you feel. And I said to her, I would love for the two of you to meet. And she said, what's the point? And I said, well, you're both important to me. And I said, again, I'm not doing anything, physically and would never do anything that you were not okay with. But, at the very least, I'd love, you two to meet. And she shook her head and she said, I don't think that's a good idea.
And things only got rockier from there. In our society, it's pretty tough functioning as a polyamorous person under the best of circumstances. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of stigma. But when you work in conservative politics and maintain an active presence in a church community, things can get real rough.
Even this conversation makes me a bit nervous, right, for some of these reasons, as much as I'm enjoying it and so forth. And yet, you're right. I mean, I am the type of person who, all things being equal, I would love to shout it from the rooftops. I just think that people would maybe jump to some conclusions about the integrity of my values morally and ethically. Some of my more religious associates and mentors would probably think that I'm living a life of sin and infidelity. Now, if I was just cheating on my wife, I think I would be lectured for that, but then told that this is something that happens, and if you can just, work things out and come back together, it can be like that never happened, hopefully. Then I think I have other associates who are probably more pragmatic, who wouldn't necessarily care morally or religiously, but would just say, like, Jason, you can't do this, and like, if you do this, though, you've got to keep this person a secret. And like what you do in your own time, it's great. Just don't let it out, because our firm has a certain image, our industry has certain norms in terms of most of the people here. Like, if you were in Hollywood or whatnot, if you're a dancer, a singer, or an actor, that would be different. But when you're dealing with constitutional law and these sorts of things, and representing conservative institutions, it's a little bit of a different matter.
A different matter entirely. In trying to explore polyamory without deceiving or betraying his wife, Jason was going up against some of the core tenets of both his faith and his political affiliation. His closet is the good book and the grand old party. Like a lot of us, as a kid, Jason had been exposed to versions of polyamory, but without that word or any other word available to describe what he was seeing and feeling. He told me about an unconventional situation in his family. His grandparents were never married. In fact, the 2 children they had together were both conceived and born while Jason's grandmother was married to another man. Everyone in their family knew Jason's grandfather was the father of her children, but she stayed with her husband and raised the children with both men present in their lives.
At a certain point, I would ask my mother about this, and she'd say, well, things got a little messy, I guess, between them at some point. But, they figured things out, and everybody's still friends. And they had a very close and sweet sort of relationship, the 3 of them, right? It's clear that they all still did love each other, but there was no bad blood between the men. They were friends, too. They would laugh and shake hands and talk about old times and everything. And so that was just kind of in the background of my upbringing.
Jason also realized pretty young that he had the capacity to develop strong romantic feelings for more than one person at a time, something our culture tells us is impossible, or means we have to choose, or that our love isn't real. But hey, speaking from experience, when you feel it yourself, it's real.
As a kid, particularly as a teenager, I definitely had the capacity to kind of like fall in love in like pairs and whatnot, intense sort of like romantic and emotional feelings for more than one person at a time. That was always something that I had a capacity for. I tend to be sort of overwhelmingly romantically interested in that way. And it was always a philosophical conundrum to me, because it seemed to me like, well, you can only marry one person. But at least for me, I can definitely feel myself having a capacity to have strong romantic feelings for more than one person. And I never had a satisfactory answer in my mind as to what you do with that. I do believe that marriage is a sacred and a holy institution. I do believe that marriage and family is sort of the backbone of society. I do believe that these commitments matter. And I never think of myself as unfaithful and didn't want to think of myself that way. But am I? And was I even in just having these feelings? So, there's all sorts of religious conversations that arise out of that, and moral and philosophical conversations. Yeah.
And those moral and philosophical conversations are Jason's jam. Or his bread and butter. I think maybe all 3. Just listen to this.
So for a lot of people, committing the act of physical indiscretion is one thing, but even having sort of these feelings inside of yourself can be seen as tantamount to adultery.
Yeah.
And, but you consider what the word adultery is. To adulterate means to water something down, to make it less potent, to make it less powerful. For me, I never felt like my feelings for one person took away from my feelings for the other. Over time, I think as we actually got into polyamory, I would discover that like my literal physical capacity to be more than one place at a time, that there's a literal logistical challenges.
Yeah.
But in terms of the amount of love I have to give, loving one person didn't have to sap from loving another.
He told me a Bible story in which someone asks Jesus the question, if a woman has had more than one husband in her life, whose wife is she when she enters the kingdom of heaven?
Jesus responds by saying, well, you misunderstand, because in the kingdom of heaven, no one is given in marriage, but rather we are like angels in heaven. And so I thought to myself, well, heaven is defined by the love we share with each other. I don't know if this means we're having sex in heaven or not, but
I hope we are.
but I mean, I'm very much open to that, actually. But to me, it seemed like the fundamental thing was understanding that if we see the world the way God intends for us to see the world, we see that love is abundant, right? And that, when we have sort of a narrow kind of fleshly way of understanding love and understanding marriage, well, then it is perhaps zero sum, right? But if we believe in love in something that is overflowing, the containers we usually put around it to keep from leaking out into the cracks are not necessarily things that are necessary, because, love has just become the spirit from which we live and do all things. And so love fulfills the law and everything that we need.
I
Now,
think you just said that Jesus is for polyamory.
well, I think, well, in a manner of speaking, because love, what's definitely true is that we are here to love each other, right?
I believe that.
Now, all love doesn't have to be romantic love, but at the same time, one thing Jesus does say is it's the treasure of a person's heart that determines the fruit of their actions, right? And if your heart is filled with love, then things that are of love are going to be a product of the way you live your life and the way you do things in the world. And that's what we really ought to judge each other by.
Never did I ever expect to find a Christian person who was using the Bible and Jesus' teachings to justify polyamory. Swoon goes my little poly heart. That's amazing. Okay. Whew. Enough with the philosophical tangents, Jason. It's getting hot in here. Let's get back to the very juicy story we were in the middle of telling. After Jason introduced the idea of an open marriage to Tamara, things continued on as normal. Almost as normal, for a while. But there was a new tension in the air.
Jason, she'd say, I know you love me. She'd say, but you're not in love with me. You love me, she said, out of nostalgia. You love me out of fondness. And I would just adamantly disagree with that. But I think that there's a way in which love is not just sentiment, it's also labor. It's the thing that you do, the active interest that you take. And so I think that I was kind of interpreting my feelings as like, well, no, I am in love with you. And I know that because I still have all these sentimental feelings for you. Whereas I think she was looking at the evaporation of effort, of labor, of like doing the things to create the conditions and the circumstances for intimacy, for peace of mind.
They were defining in love differently.
Right. I think so. And I would come to understand that bit by bit over time. I also don't think at that point, I didn't really fully appreciate just how far apart we had grown and just how much of her I was no longer seeing, And, for my part, I felt like there were a lot that she wasn't seeing in me too, that Michaela had eyes for.
Jason wanted Tamara to meet Michaela. They were a year into their mutual crush, but had remained strictly platonic. Jason thought if Tamara met her and liked her, it could pave the way for him to move forward with Michaela in a way that wouldn't damage his marriage.
Michaela and Tamara, we all met, we hung out one night, and it was a very ticklish evening for me. We didn't talk explicitly about polyamory, but everybody knew that was kind of the thing we were basically exploring. And I remember there was a moment after we had all sort of drunk a bit where I was kind of, I was sort of holding Tamara's hand, and I was kind of singing. I was singing a song across the table to Michaela. It was a song that she liked, and for this brief moment, I kind of felt like this is what it could feel like. This is what it could be like.
The evening went well, but Michaela eventually pulled away. They remained friends and colleagues, but they never did become lovers.
I was a little bit heartbroken about that at the time, though, and it kind of led me to think that this was a few years ago now, that, this whole idea was kind of a fantasy.
The idea of polyamory?
Right. At least for me. And, given who I am, given my career in the law, and given the kind of traditional and sort of conservative environment that I live in, not just professionally, but in my own family, my scandalous grandfather notwithstanding, that really maybe I should pull my head out of the clouds and focus on reconnecting with Tamara, who I was just starting to realize how much I had disconnected from. What I did not know, though, was that Tamara, unbeknownst to me, had started going down a whole rabbit hole of investigating just the wider world of polyamory.
Cue the doomy rabbit hole music. And while standing in line at customs after returning from an overseas work trip, Jason got a text that kind of freaked him out.
It's a text that I wasn't expecting. I opened it up, and Tamara says to me, she says, "Hey, remember that sister wives, brother husbands thing that we were talking about? I think I might actually want to try that." So I was frozen in place looking at my phone. And I did have sort of a queasy kind of feeling at first. Clearly her mind has been somewhere that I did not appreciate that it was.
It might sound kind of crazy, but this is actually super common. Jason was the one who wanted this. Jason was the one who introduced the idea. But Tamara suddenly having her own interest in it evoked feelings he was not expecting.
Well, yeah, totally. It definitely hit a little different, I guess.
Yeah.
But I did think to myself, I never lost my sense that it is a beautiful ideal, the ideal of polyamory. And I had sort of given up on it for us, but when she sent me that message, I sort of tapped back into that feeling of like, well, there's something beautiful about that to me. And yeah, if this is something she wants to try and things have felt a little bit stagnant between her and I thought, well, maybe I owe it to her to give this a try, because I definitely wanted her to to be open to this when I brought it up, a couple years before. And so I responded saying, okay, well, let's try. Although I definitely had this feeling of like, okay. Now I kind of wish that I could sort of like snatch the message back after I let it fly, because I kind of, as soon as I let it go, I was just like, ooh, I feel like life just changed.
Yeah. And it changed fast. A little too fast.
My wife connected with somebody. I guess it took a few weeks, but for me, it seemed like it took 5 minutes. She wound up connecting with somebody pretty quickly. They wound up having a pretty explosive connection early on, and now we had agreed that there needed to be testing and all these precautions taken before either of us sort of went all the way with anybody that we met, and she did stay within those bounds, but their relationship wound up progressing to physical interaction quickly enough to where I just felt like floored by it and not happy by it.
Oh.
And at a certain point, I was just like, no, I don't want to play anymore.
And things got explosive.
There was one night where she didn't actually come home. She'd always told me that if she was going to stay out, that she'd let me know where she was, but she didn't on this occasion. I had the guy's address, Reggie, and I drove like 100 miles an hour at like 2 a.m. to Reggie's house to kind of like bang on his door. I'm not that kind of guy. I don't like, physically threaten people.
Like straight out of a screenplay.
Exactly. So basic, right? And
you're not alone.
Right. She wound up stepping out the door, and we drove home and had the worst fight, and basically agreed to get divorced.
Wow.
Right. But then the next morning, after I had a chance to sort of cool down, I reflected on the fact that in the few weeks that, well, I guess in the couple months that her and him were dating, gosh, she was happier than she had been for, years with me. And I just sort of had this feeling like divorce was going to be hell, not just for the two of us, but for our kids too. I should say, I went through divorce. I mean, my parents divorced, and I remember the bitterness of that. I just didn't want that for our kids, and I also didn't want her to be unhappy. And I understood the feelings that she was feeling, So I came to her that morning, and it sort of seemed like she was edging towards saying, okay, well, let me just find a way to wrap things up with him. But she was clearly devastated. And I told her, I was like, you don't have to be devastated. We can keep working on this.
So this is a thing I found that tends to separate the polyamorous folks from the other non-monogamous folks. Poly people like to run headfirst into their own emotional hangups.
I had actually wanted to meet Reggie when it became clear that they were moving in a more serious direction kind of quickly. And she resisted that. But then after our blow up, she said, well, maybe it would help if you guys met and he's open to it. She gave me his number. I reached out to him. We got coffee.
Just you and him?
Just him and I.
Wow.
Yeah. And it really was amazing just how completely opposite he was from me on the surface, like just appearance wise, He just sort of like had this bit of a punk rock kind of guy, I'm very much suit and tie.
Uh-huh. Clean cut.
Yeah. Now he also came from a bit of a traditional sort of religious background, but he had been polyamorous for a long time, and he had an ex-wife, and he had kids, and he had all sorts of horror stories about polyamory, actually. Initially, he was sort of pushed into it by a girlfriend who he was in love with, and he didn't really want to do it. And then she went and broke all of their barriers and all of their agreements.
How to do non-monogamy wrong.
He had terrible stories. What was interesting, though, and he shared those stories with me, I think, to sort of communicate that he understood what I was going through. And he really did. It was remarkable. I felt more understood by him than anybody in my life.
Including your wife.
Well, yeah. I mean, because, he and I are connecting as men in this conversation, but him with a lot more experience than I had.
Oh, I just have to say how much I love this part of the story. Jason literally busted into Reggie's house in the middle of the night, figurative guns blazing, causing a huge ruckus. And yet Reggie was willing to meet Jason for coffee and to help reassure him that he wasn't out to steal his wife, that there was room for both of them in her life. This is classic poly behavior, and it warms my heart.
I realized that this was a person who I have very deep values in common with. This is Reggie. He's compassionate. He's empathetic and understanding. He's not a judgmental person. He's a man who loves his kids the way I do, and who sacrifices himself daily to provide for them. He's somebody who doesn't try to put gates around love, but who does appreciate the fact that there needs to be respect and structure, even in a polyamorous context. And so he taught me a lot, and he heard me in a very deep sort of way. And so I definitely considered him a fast friend. It really did make a big difference to me knowing Reggie.
Now that Tamara had taken a lover, Jason was realizing that he still had a lot of work to do, both on his marriage and on himself.
I still felt down in myself. First of all, there is the project of me really wanting to reconnect with Tamara. And sort of take an inventory of the fact that I had really lost touch with this woman a long, long time ago. The things she liked to watch, the things that she liked to read, her favorite foods, her favorite restaurants, the places that she wanted to travel to, episodes of drama with her friends, the things she did not get to do in work and in education because she was at home taking care of my kids while I was out, traveling the world. These were things that I just was not aware of. I hadn't ever really stopped to take account of how much I didn't know, how much I had missed about this person. And when I tried to play catch up, I realized just how terribly far behind I was and we were. But we did find ourselves through the vulnerability and kind of the emotions of all this, being more open with each other, being more vulnerable with each other. We even started to reconnect physically, which was amazing, but also difficult because part of what she began to be able to educate me a bit about, and since then I've taken responsibility for educating myself more, but I think through a more kind of, this phrase sex positivity, and I think it kind of opens the door for the area of inquiry that she was getting into. But I think that for a lot of men, sex is about gratification, right? You're trying to have an orgasm, and there's an ego component to it, a lot of times, whether we admit it or not. And for a lot of people in general, sex is not so much about pleasure and understanding your body and understanding really the art of physical intimacy and the self-knowledge that's required to be able to practice that with another person in a way that makes that other person feel completely safe and like they can completely be who they are in the context of physical interaction. I just was not used to thinking in these terms.
Oh, it feels so good to hear a straight man talking this way. Oh, wow. The validation I feel. Okay, I don't know about you all, but when I was growing up, the message about sex was clear. If you were a woman, sex was about pleasing the man. He probably wouldn't know how to please you because your equipment is all confusing and messy and weird looking. But as long as you please him and he's happy, you're good. You've done your job. He might stay with you. Just keep putting out. Ugh. Took many years for me to realize how absolutely fucked that idea is. And to start seeking male lovers who understood that the name of the game is mutual pleasure and who didn't think jokes about not being able to find the clitoris were all that funny. It's not that hard to find. But in my experience, most men aren't like that, and they get real defensive if you try to talk to them about it.
Well, it's a hard thing for men to talk about. Yeah, just, I think in a number of different ways, just because it's hard to talk about something in terms that you're not used to thinking about it. And then when you begin to think about it in those terms and you begin to look at your own way of behaving sexually as being selfish, then suddenly there's guilt there. You feel bad about yourself when you really start to consider the implications of that for the way in which you've been treating the other, person or persons in your life in this incredibly important area. And
now, see, when that guilt comes into play, I've seen a lot of people get defensive and double down on what they were already doing. It's the rare, brave soul like you who's like, oh, I need to change something.
Yeah.
I just want to shout that out. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the compliment. Of course, I kind of felt like, not that I didn't want to do that, but I also felt like I didn't have any choice anyway. We were going to make the relationship work.
Jason struggled with the fact that Tamara now had a full-fledged boyfriend and he had bupkis. He knew it would probably make things easier for him if he had someone too. But the challenges of dating as a married, polyamorous man were compounded by the challenges of dating as a Christian Republican man. There's just not a lot of overlap there.
There's just all sorts of ways in which I didn't really know how to fit into this kind of like poly community, such as it was, When I did look at some of the dating profiles, it seemed like about 15 or 20% of them were literally just kind of like Republicans need not apply. And I was like, oh yeah. Well, that's a thing.
That is a thing.
Yeah, right. It's like so-and-so likes your profile, but you look and it's like, no Republicans, ACAB, and all cops are bastards.
What's ACAB?
All cops are bastards.
Oh.
Yeah. I've got a lot of police officers in my family. I have represented police officers and given legal consultation and, work with departments and whatnot, among other clients and associations and so forth. I was totally open to dating somebody whose politics and religion was different from mine as long as we had some deeper things in common. But, as soon as, people ask you well, what do you do for work? Or, just tell me something about yourself. I just go through this whole checklist of things I don't know if she's going to want to hear that. It's I don't know if she's going to like that. I don't know if she's going to like that.
And trying to date people who weren't on non-monogamous dating apps like Field was just as bad. Women outside of non-monogamous communities do not tend to trust married men who say their wife is totally okay with them being on a date, and for good reason. Plenty of men lie about things like that, especially now that open relationships are becoming more mainstream. The rejections were piling up for Jason.
She was like, I actually think polyamory is disgusting. She said, I don't want that lifestyle. She said, I do think it can work, but I don't think it's for me. She said, I thought about it and I realized it's not for me.
Poly women weren't interested because of his political and religious identities, and non-poly women were freaked out by him being poly. He couldn't win.
I went through several months where I was just very blue, but things had kind of stabilized. Tamara and I were no longer really talking about divorce, but we did have many difficult moments. Her relationship with Reggie, however, was going very well. I was happy for her, but also a little bit salty that things were more difficult for me.
And just at the moment when he was ready to give up, Jason met Leanne. More after the break. Jason met Leanne at a concert, and he found her so beautiful and interesting that he just assumed she'd never be interested in him. Until she asked him to coffee as they were saying goodbye. Hey. But when they met up and he told her about his newly open marriage, she pulled the plug.
She said, I thought about it and I realized it's not for me, but I do hope we can be friends. And I was brokenhearted just over kind of my own situation.
I thought I wanted polyamory, and now my wife has a boyfriend, and I'm here.
Yeah, just sitting in the corner of the sandbox, playing by myself.
You're not alone. It's such a common thing. I've heard it from a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's like this peculiar irony of trying to explore something that is so unconventional that often the person whose idea it was is the person who's later like, wait a second, why am I not eating my cake too?
Yeah, exactly.
Months later, though, Leanne reached out.
I got a message out of the blue from Leanne just saying, hey, I was just thinking about you and hoping that you're okay. Do you want to catch up on the phone? And I said, yeah, sure. And so we wound up jumping on the line out of nowhere. Now, Tamara was over at Reggie's that night. So it just so happened that, I had the whole kind of night to myself. Kids were in bed. And we talked for 4 hours.
They talked about their lives, their families and friends, their biggest love affairs. They got a little high and sang their favorite Disney songs to each other. I mean, this was high school puppy love level talking on the phone.
The more high school it feels, the better it is.
And eventually, the conversation took a turn.
I said to her something along the lines of, I think that a lot of people make the assumption that, if a man is polyamorous, that this is just a way of kind of justifying wanting to sleep around and so forth. And I reiterated to her, I was like, and I love my wife. I love my wife dearly, and I'm committed to her. I was like, but I also believe in commitment in any relationship that's serious, And I said, the truth is that I have a lot more love to give and a lot more commitment to give. And I feel like I'm ready for that. And she listened to me and she was silent for a moment. And she said, that's beautiful. She said, that's so beautiful.
And she agreed to a second date.
Leanne actually lives almost in a whole other part of the state. Like she does not live close. So I actually drove a long way to pick her up, bring her back, and then drove a long way to take her back home. And so we passed through some mountain roads and stepped out into a lookout. It was sort of a foggy night. Yeah, stepped out into the mist and I pulled her into a kiss in the fog. And
how romantic.
Yeah. And in the moment of that kiss, all the cracks in my heart were sealed. Truly. It just felt like that,
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. And we just forged this bond of incredible peace and incredible intimacy. I think we're both people who've been hurt in life in different ways. We're both people who value loyalty and commitment and who have a great need for affection and vulnerability. And I think we were the right people meeting at the right moment.
I'm not crying. You're crying. Shh.
Since then, she has been, because of the way we talk about love, it's so singular, like I want to say like, the love of my life, but like I have more than one love of my life. Right. And that sounds like an adulterating sort of statement to people, but it's like, but what do you do if you're a person who you've been married, man or woman, you've been married 2 or 3 times in your life and you told somebody that they were the love of your life? It was like, was that feeling now invalid because things didn't work out in the way you wanted to and you met somebody else? No, I feel like, the state of loving somebody that deeply is valid, regardless of where it happens on the timeline. And the simple fact of the matter is that when me and my wife have made so much progress in terms of rekindling our trust, our vulnerability, our intimacy of connection, and the feelings that I have with her are deep and beautiful and rich with love and with affection. And when I'm with Leanne, it's different because she's a different person and we're a different pair of people, but in different ways, the sense of peace, vulnerability, intimacy, the experience of looking into her eyes and my lips meeting her lips, it is no less magical. Neither of them are any less magical for the existence of the other. And actually, what's extraordinary and what Leanne, I think, has also come to enjoy is just sort of the tickles that come with talking about, our different connections, with different people. And I definitely have this experience with Tamara where, now she'll talk about her relationship with Reggie, who she loves, and I'll talk about my relationship with Leanne, who I love, and we will kiss in the middle of those conversations.
I love that. Nothing's perfect, and there's still a lot of things to figure out and obstacles to overcome, but Jason's sweet little polycule is humming along smoothly these days. And now he's focused on setting up his life in a way that will allow him and Tamara to welcome Reggie and Leanne into their lives in a more established, authentic way. He's begun telling the truth about his relationships, just to his most sympathetic family members.
So my older brother, and he was just like, all right, fight the machine, way to go. But then I have a younger sister who is deeply religious. I really want her to meet Leanne, and also I'm really not sure how to open that conversation. I did tell my mother, who has always been very supportive of me, no matter what I'm doing, whether she agreed with it or not. When I told her about this, though, it was a little bit harder for her, and she had to sit with it for a bit. And she actually, her initial response was something along the lines of like, why don't you guys just get divorced,
Right. Let's throw the marriage out, right?
Yeah. She didn't want us to get divorced, but she was like, but why would you put yourselves through this? And, she also had concerns for the kids, right? And so that's a whole other aspect of things. And I do have a teenager at this point. And I think she's probably putting two and two together. But this is something that me and Tamara are talking about actively right now. How do we have this conversation with our kids eventually? Because it's not like we raised them to look at this as normal necessarily,
Right.
It was not a subject at all. Right?
Yeah.
So in any event, but finding ways to kind of bring Leanne into my world is important to me, and I think important to her too. And, with Tamara, looking forward to the future and thinking about how do we build really a family dynamic that's right for us and that respects the other obligations and relationships we have in our lives while really upholding, frankly, the sanctity of marriage, because I look at Leanne, I look at myself as being married two ways. Okay. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I think that just living life in a way that honors those relationships and all of the others connected to each of us is really what I want to do. And hopefully I can do that while still being able to make a living and not, not experiencing the reputational hazards and so forth. But, it's like, if you live in truth, come what may.
You live in truth, come what may. I love that. Truth. Oh, truth is a sticky subject in our culture. Because we've been trained to believe in ideas about morality that were developed by men molding a patriarchal, sex-negative society. In a lot of ways, the truth is something people run from. If you've been convinced that wanting more than one romantic relationship at a time is morally wrong, then your truth is that you are a bad person. But anyone who has ever experienced feelings of deep romantic love for more than one person knows that those feelings don't feel wrong or bad at all. They feel right. They feel beautiful. They feel divine.
Like I said, actually loyalty, fidelity means a great deal to me. There's also just this reality that God has put us in a world where we do have this rich capacity for loving in different directions simultaneously. At least many of us do, and that can produce some of the most beautiful moments of our lives.
got secrets.
And that is it for this episode, Pine Cones. Thank you, as always, for listening. Is Jason not kind of a hottie? I mean, I know you don't know what he looks like, but his voice, right? Right? Okay. If you're loving the show, please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference when it comes to getting the attention of sexy new listeners. And if you've got a story to tell and think you'd be a great guest for Closet Ed, please email me at closetedpodcast@gmail.com. I'd also love to hear from you if you have suggestions or comments. And lastly, if you'd like to submit an anonymous mini confession for possible airing on Closet Ed, record a voice memo and send it to closetedpodcast@gmail.com. I'm putting together a fun little series of these. I can't wait to hear from you. Next week, something a little different. I'm going to introduce you to Darla, a happily married woman who loves dogs and cares for her aging parents, and does a little sex work now and then to make ends meet.
There's a silent agreement where I have gone out and done some sex work, and we just don't talk about it.
That's next week. Until then, I'm Samia Mounts, and this is Closet Ed.
We all got secrets.
Hear that? That's what's called green noise. I'd never even heard of green noise before I discovered the BetterSleep app. Now I can't imagine my life without it. As a long-suffering insomniac and a person with ADHD, hello racing thoughts, BetterSleep has changed my life. Green noise is proven to soothe the mind, improving both relaxation and focus. So whether I need to fall asleep fast or settle in for some focused work, the BetterSleep app has my back, and I'm not alone. BetterSleep has over 65 million downloads. It's been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, and Today, and is an Apple App Store editor's choice. And green noise is just the beginning. The app has dozens of relaxing sounds you can mix together in different combinations depending on your needs. Here's the best part. You can try it for free for 30 whole days with the link bettersleep.com/closeted. That's right. You can get a whole month of great sleep for free. For real, this app is the only reason I'm functioning right now. I used to be so tired. Go try it. bettersleep.com/closeted.